G'day commers, welcome back to the bush. In this episode of Lockhub's Fall Driving, we're going to be checking out the 18 volt misting fan from Ryobi, and we're going to test it 6 ways from Sunday. We're breaking out all the ohmmeters. So we've got the onometer, which is a wind speed meter, the tachometer, which will tell us how fast the blade's turning, even the temperature meter, and we might even look at the bucketometer. So let's get into it. So first up, let's have a look at the box. So it claims it can fit on an 11 to 20 litre bucket. It pivots, though, doesn't oscillate, and it can also sit on a flat surface. Now, the alleged runtime is 18 hours on a single 5 amp hour battery, and we'll be testing that. And it has a 2-speed fan and a 2-speed misting arrangement. Now, if we look down here, it runs on 18 volts, and we'll look further down the track whether, if you're already locked into a different system, maybe Makita or Milwaukee, how you might be able to run your Ryobi misting fan on one of those batteries. The fan speed, and we'll be testing that, the flow rate of litres per hour, which is 5.1 litres per hour, we'll be checking that, the air velocity, maximum hose water pressure, so it can actually take an input from a hose, and bucket diameter, 290 to 304, and the weight is just over 2 kilograms. So let's check out the unit itself. So as we look at the back of the unit, we've got the water inlet here, if you want to connect it up to a hose. Now, interestingly, if you connect it up to a hose, though I assume in a camping situation most people won't, you don't actually need to turn on the pump for the misting fan. It'll automatically just come out of the nozzles without using your battery power to run the pump, which is a good thing because running the pump will decrease your battery life. But we'll get into that later. And this is the battery compartment. Now, it'll only take certain size batteries, and I think the biggest one you'll get in there is the 5 amp hour with the lid shut. And it's got a seal all the way around the edge there. So to stop a bit of water ingress, what you do is simply mount the battery, shut the lid, and you've got a reasonably watertight seal, because the unit itself, especially if the wind's blowing the wrong way, gets absolutely saturated, and it has to have some way of protecting the battery and preventing corrosion on your terminals. So let's have a look at the underside now. And here's the underside. And as you can see, there's not a heck of a lot going on here. We've got the water inlet here for mains pressure, and this is to suck from a bucket. And you've also noticed it's got a couple of keepers here, which is handy. So if you're using the water inlet here or in storage, you've got somewhere to put the hose. And we'll be checking if the hose is long enough to reach right to the bottom of a 20 litre bucket. Let's have a look at the front. So here's the front of the unit here. Now we've got our 2 brass misting nozzles there, and they move when we tilt the unit up. Now the unit tilts to about 45 degrees and it shoots down to probably about 110 or 115 degrees. And we got our 2 controls here, and they're both covered in protective rubber transparent molds. Now the switches, down for speed 1 and up for speed 2 on the fan, and on the right hand side we've got our pump. So down for speed 1 and up for speed 2. Let's see what sort of buckets it'll fit on. So here we have our 2 most commonly available buckets. We have our 9 litre bucket and our 20 litre bucket. It fits on the 9 litre bucket, no problems, but it's not that stable. The stability, of course, is going to be better when it's full, but when it runs down a bit, and if there's a bit of wind blowing, well, you might well knock it over. Let's try it on the 20 litre bucket. And of course, the pickup on the 9 litre bucket reaches all the way to the bottom. And that's a lot better. It actually locks in to the 20 litre bucket, and our stability is a lot better. So pickup reaches all the way to the bottom of the 20 litre bucket. If you have the room, my preference definitely for this unit would be the 20 litre bucket for stability alone. This is an optical tachometer. So what I've done is I've put a bit of reflective tape on one of the fan blades, and we're going to check out exactly how fast this fan spins in low and in high. Let's have a look at that. And here's the Ryobi misting fan's RPM, or revolutions per minute, or how many times the fan rotates through a full 360 degrees per minute. Now in the low fan setting, 1411 RPM, but when we move to the high setting, 2813 RPM, or just about right on twice as much. Well, that was almost dead on in both low and in high. But if you're spinning a disc, a flat disc at those sort of RPMs, well, you're not getting any wind out of it. So it depends on the design of the fan blades, how efficient it is. Now, to find that out, we've got ourselves an anemometer, or that's a fancy name for a wind speed meter, and we're going to check out now exactly how fast the wind is coming out in low and in high. Let's check that out now. So on the low fan setting, as you can see on the readout of the anemometer, we got 11 kilometers an hour, and that was at the face of the fan. In high speed, we only got an increase to 16.5 kilometers an hour, but it felt like considerably more. It felt like considerably more output. Now we know exactly how fast the wind speed is in both high and low. We can check out the wind velocity versus the factory claim, and how many cubic meters per minute, or for those who speak freedom units, CFM, this fan outputs. And here's the all-important airflow data. So 16.5 kilometers an hour measured in high equals 275 meters per minute, but claimed was 390 meters per minute. So we're almost down 30%. Now to work out our cubic meters per minute, now Ryobi never actually gave a figure for this, and this is how you work it out. So it's the airflow in meters a second times by the area in meters squared times by 60. And our fan ID was about 21 centimeters, and that gives us an overall area of 0.035 meters squared. Now when you substitute in the data for the high fan setting, we ended up with a cubic meters a minute of 9.624, or a CFM, cubic feet per minute, of nearly 340. And in the low fan, our cubic meters per minute was 6.418, and CFM 226, or thereabouts. So that's the airflow data for the fan. Well, I was a little disappointed with that, to be honest. Well, I mean, we were 30% down on wind speed velocity than what the factory claimed. That's not great. That's almost a third loss in performance. But what about how much noise it makes? So let's check out how loud it is in both low fan and high fan. And here's the low fan reading of 53.1 decibels. And on the high fan reading, we got 63.3 decibels. Now, one thing to take into consideration when you're talking decibels of sound output is it's not a linear relationship. So if you're at 10 decibels and go to 20 decibels, it isn't twice as loud, it's considerably more. A doubling of sound energy is only 3 decibels. So going from 53 to 63, it's considerably louder. It's not just a little bit louder, or in this case, just over 20%. So it doesn't make all that much noise. In low fan, it's barely audible. And in high fan mode, yes, it is considerably louder, but you can still have a conversation right next to it. So noise isn't that much of an issue. But how long does the battery last? So what I did was I got a fully charged 5 amp hour battery, and I stuck it in the machine, and I ran it in low until it died, and I ran it in high until it died with another freshly charged battery, and here are the results. Now on the low fan setting, we've got 20.3 hours runtime. It ran that long, I actually had to take it to work with me the next day to see when it had run out. And on the high fan setting, a very respectable 11.2 hours. So if you have a larger or a smaller battery than the 5 amp hour, you'll be able to work out your runtime with fan only based on these figures. So when it comes to runtime, 11 hours in high, 20 hours in low, well, the factory quotes 18 plus hours on a fully charged 5 amp hour battery, and it does that in low, and it does 11 hours in high, which is a lot less than the 18 hours, but it's more than a full day of work. So I consider the runtime on a fully charged 5 amp hour battery more than adequate. But what about the amount of water it goes through? Let's check that out now. Now on the low setting, we chew through 5.1 litres per hour, and on the high setting, 7.4 litres per hour, or approximately another 50% water with the mister running, which might provide an issue depending on the capacity of the bucket the fan is sitting on, if it's not plugged into the mains water. So the factory tells us it uses 5.1 litres per hour, and it does roughly in low, but in high it uses roughly half as much again, 7.5 litres. So we're using considerably more water, by a factor of about 50%, than the factory claim, which is not great. What about though, how long she runs when we got the pump running and the fan running? Let's have a look at that. Now in the low fan setting with low spray, we managed to get 11.5 hours of run time and chew through 57.5 litres of water. And that's considerably bigger than a 20 litre bucket. So you'll be filling up the bucket multiple times throughout the day. And on the high fan with the high spray running, 7.75 hours, or almost a full 8 hours, and went through approximately the same amount of water, 57.4 litres, or only 100 ml between the two. So again, multiple fills of the bucket, and especially if you're running a small bucket, a 9 litre bucket, you'll be filling it up every time you turn around. So that certainly dropped down our run time, turning on the misting pump. We went from around about 11 hours on high fan to 7.75 on high fan with high pump. So we dropped in excess of 3 hours of run time, but it's still nearly 8 hours on one fully charged 5 amp hour battery. That's not too bad in my book. Of more concern was the nearly 60 litres of water we went through. So you're going to have to fill your bucket up 3+ times per fully charged battery, and 60 litres to carry with you just to run your misting fan. That's a lot of water. But how effective is it at cooling you down? Let's check that out now. Now with an ambient temperature of around about 24.5 degrees, 1 metre away from the fan, with low fan and low water on, we got down to 19.5 degrees with a thermocouple probe. And high fan, high water, 18.8. But obviously we're using considerably more water there. With a low fan and low water 2 metres away, which is the distance you probably have the fan, 1 metre a bit close, 19.4, so not too much difference there. And with high fan, high water, 2 metres away, 18.9 degrees. So it definitely has a cooling effect on the air. So it's definitely effective in cooling down the air. But as they say, the proof is in the pudding, or in this case, the video. So let's put some water in the bucket and check out how it works. Let's give it a red hot go. So firstly, low fan and low pump. And as you can see, the mist heading out this way. Now let's try high fan and high pump. And we're getting considerably more wind and noise and water as well. Though, as you saw, it's not considerably more effective when it comes to cooling. But what do we think in the end? Well, firstly, let me regale you a story. I'm known amongst my mates to be a little bit of a Makita sycophant. And the reason is, of course, you get locked in to a battery. I bought the drill, and then I bought the impact. And then I thought, well, a couple of those garden tools wouldn't go astray. And I bought the chainsaw, which is fantastic. And there's a link up there all about the chainsaw. And then I bought a few other things. So I've got the whippersnipper, and I've got the blower, and I've got lots of Makita stuff. And of course the Makita battery, which is one of these suckers, don't work on this. Unless, of course, you have an adapter. Now the whole reason behind me getting one of these was I was in an instructor update that I was running up at Glenpatrick Campground, just out of the Pyrenees Ranges. Anyone who's been there, check out Old Bluff Track. It's an absolute doozy. And a friend of mine, actually the other half of Lockie Hub's forward driving, Matt, he's a Ryobi sycophant, and he brought his Ryobi misting fan with it. And of course, I was a little dismissive at the beginning. Oh, Ryobi is going to be rubbish, yada, yada, yada. If Makita brought one out, of course it'll be 100 times better, until he turned it on. It was a hot day and I was converted in about 5 seconds. It is on hot days when you're away from power and perhaps you have a water supply, but you're away from the beach or maybe a river you want to jump into. These things are the best things since sliced bread, especially if you have the room. Yes, they do go through a bit of water, so you'll need access to water, and a lot of it. We can go through 60 litres in a day, no problems. But, oh, geez, I tell you what, it's worth it. It's no good if you're going into desert country because you'll need that 60 litres of water for other purposes. But if you're heading into the high country near a stream on a warm day, you're doing a spot of trout fishing, one of these will transform camping for you, let me tell you. Anyway guys, now if you like this video, don't forget to give it the old thumbs up, and if you didn't, by all means, give it a thumbs down twice. Thanks guys, we'll see you in the next one.